Welcome to the iPhoneography podcast. I'm Greg McMillan, and I am joined by my two cohorts, Dwight and Dave. Hello, guys.
Hey, guys. Good evening.
Hey, everyone.
So we are going to talk about where we've learned stuff about photography in general or iPhone photography specifically. And the first what I want to do is just a little bit of housekeeping. And somebody recently asked about how do you see the podcast when listening on the phone type of thing. And, maybe we don't explain this enough to people, but when we talk about an image, we show it on the podcast player in the phone. It works on the phone. I believe it works in CarPlay. iOS updated again recently, and I haven't tried it, but it should. Not that we want you looking at the CarPlay screen while driving, but it works on the Mac as well. I'm assuming it works on the iPad. I don't listen to the show or any podcast on the iPad really, but so when we do this podcast and we have images, I embed the image file in the audio so that when I make a chapter mark, when that chapter starts, the image shows on the podcast player. So you have to have your phone unlocked to see it. Like if your phone's just sitting on the desk or on the table and you're listening to the podcast, you won't be able to see the image unless you unlock the phone, and then bang, it'll show up. So there's some apps that it works great in, and that is obviously the Apple Podcast app, Overcast, Pocket Casts. I know they work because I put them on my phone to try them. But one app that it will not work in is Spotify. So just be mindful of that. If you're listening to the program on Spotify and we're talking about an image, you won't be able to see the image. Another way to see them is to go to the website, iPhoneography.ca, and it's in the show notes. And on the blog, you'll see the show notes for each episode as they come out. And they get posted when shortly after the audio version gets released. The show notes for the YouTube are in there, and any links that we may add will be added after the show, sometime between, the next day or sometime over the next 24 or 48 hours. I'll add those links in. And obviously on the YouTube video, you're going to be able to see the images. Now, because we're using StreamYard and it's the free version, it's only 720p. It's not super high def or nothing. And so they're going to be, crunched a little bit, but the best way to see them is to go to the website. The images are posted there where you can see them good and nice and clear. So that's how you're going to be able to see the images while you listen to the show. Now, again, on the website, they're not posted till a couple of days after the recording, but they're there if you want to see them. You could also listen to the show on the website. If you go to the podcast page, I believe it is, all the audio for the last 10 shows is there. Another thing I wanted to mention is, and this is, on behalf of Dave and Dwight here, I want to congratulate Shane Mawson for reaching 100,000 subscribers on his photography channel. So he put a post on his Facebook page, link in the description, of his silver plaque that he got with the YouTube button. So, congratulations to Shane for that. He's been a friend of the show for quite some time now, and well-deserved. He's really worked hard with his channel, and it's good to see him get recognized like that and have that many people subscribe to his channel. So
Job,
he was a little he was a little absent for a while because he was basically redoing his house, but now he's back and he's already had a few videos come on since he's been done that. So go to hit the link for his YouTube channel in the show notes and have a look. There's a lot of good stuff there.
Yeah, and I'll also say,
finally,
I would say, given that YouTube's algorithm, if he hasn't posted for a while, it may not come up on your YouTube feed. If you're used to I'm just going to scroll through YouTube and see the new videos, he may not show. So go out of your way and just kind of, like I said, like Greg said, go to his channel, watch maybe the last video, and then it'll get kind of reconfigured because they never put out, here's the latest, here's the next latest, in order. It's all based on some hidden algorithm that honestly, they probably don't even know how it's exactly being done.
Yeah, really. And, funny, not funny, but interesting note about Shane getting this plaque. In his post, he said there's about 115 million YouTube channels out there. And I mean, these are all just rough numbers, obviously, because nobody knows exactly. But the number of people who gain 100,000 followers is 0.6 of 1% of all the channels that are on there. So that's pretty good. Good on Shane for achieving that. That's pretty awesome. And the last thing I want to mention is we're going to take a break on our next scheduled show, which would be in 2 weeks, because the week after that is WWDC. So we're going to record that night, the night that WDC happens, and we'll talk about anything, new with the cameras and stuff like that. So stay tuned for that one. So just so just be aware that the next, in 2 weeks' time, we won't have a show. And then after that, we'll probably just carry on. So on our regularly scheduled time. So we'll have one June 8th, and then I guess we'll have another one on June 15th for the live stream. So on to the topic of the evening, learning resources. And this comes from a comment in the Facebook group where someone said that it was either the Facebook group or an email. Maybe it was an email where, it'd be nice to have a list of places where, for learning resources, where people can learn stuff. And so we're going to, rather than, just have a list of, it would be easy to put a list of places in a post on the group or something like that. But we're just going to talk about where we've learned some stuff and how how it's helped us in our photography. So I've got a few different ones here. So I'm going to start with one here, and then we'll kind of rotate through, guys. My first pick is Jack Hollingsworth. So we recently talked about Jack's course that he did called Intentional Photography, and it was done for a moment when he produced. But now, and that was in 2022, but now here in 2026, they're available free on YouTube. So I'll put the link back in the show notes, so we had it there before. And if you haven't checked these out, they're fantastic. He's not a technical guy with his photography, but he's more the emotional side, the storytelling side, but he also hits on features of the iPhone camera, and everything he does is in the iPhone camera and the Photos app. And now keep in mind, it's 4 years old, this course. So some of the features of the camera may seem a little different, like photographic styles has changed over time. So, but I mean, you'll be able to pick this stuff up. But what I've learned from Jack, I mean, the first time I saw Jack's tutorial type of work was, gosh, I don't know how long ago it was now, but it was back when Camera Plus was the app to get. And he did he was actually involved in the team that helped develop that app. He was like he had some creative input, I believe. And he put videos on there. It might have been for Adorama or someone, where he showed that camera app, and he was talking about how to adjust the white balance to suit the scene and all this stuff. There's some really cool, interesting video tutorials that he had on YouTube. So that's where I kind of started to learn more about the iPhone camera system. And it's really helped me over the years. Like I take that stuff with me even today. Like I'll use a manual app like Reflex. Any of these manual camera apps will have a white balance slider, or most of them will, where you can adjust the color temperature of the image. And if you shoot RAW or Pro RAW, I mean, that's adjustable in post. So, things like that, I've really been able to carry with me through the years. And over those years, I've got to know Jack, and he's a friend of mine. I've never met him in person, but we've talked on the phone a number of times. And, I think we're kindred spirits when it comes to iPhone photography. And he's been doing it longer than I have, but, he's a great, great learning resource. So do check out those episodes. There's 10 of them. The longest one might be 10 minutes. The shortest one might be 6 minutes. So it's not a big time consuming thing. You can binge watch the whole thing in a couple hours, and by all means, check them out for sure. So that's my first one. So Dave, what have you got?
Well, and this sounds, it's going to be something that isn't around anymore, unfortunately. But where I really learned and got deep dives into iPhone photography is the Tiny Shutter podcast. And it's still there at tinyshutter.com. And there are certain episodes which, certain episodes are, I would say, are not timeless. Let's talk about the iPhone, rumors about the iPhone 9, whatever it's going to be called.
Let's face it, Dave.
Yeah.
Episode 247.
Okay, yeah, Mr. Leo, yes.
That one will live on in infamy or whatever the phrase is. So just saying.
oh,
Okay,
yeah.
no, carry on.
But there's a lot in terms of looking at photos and trying to think about shots and exploring and getting the thought behind the process. There's a lot of things you can talk about the new technology, and we do on our show, but there's lots of things you can talk about which are, independent of the technology. And a lot of times, and honestly, I'm kind of shocked there aren't more podcasts like ours, where if you just get people who just love taking photos and talk about it, and just having that kind of, round table talk about what's going on, you can learn a lot by just listening in. Just hearing that, oh, and this person, here's one perspective, and here's another, and this is how this other person approaches it, and just seeing, and honestly, a lot of times it's knowing what's even possible. It's like, oh, you can do that. I had no idea. It's one of those, if you don't even know it's possible, you don't even try it. You don't even think about trying something. I'm thinking about like the first time Matt Hoffman, I heard Matt talk about taking multiple shots and on the phone, combining the multiple shots together to get the proper, setup and everything else. And I didn't even think about doing that on the iPhone. I didn't even think, okay, you can do that on the phone? Now, this was, 8 years ago or however long it was. But, it was a matter of just hearing people talk about it and seeing what can happen when they're taking real photos.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times when you see reviews of the phone, it's, oh, we're trying out, so we're going to try to, stress the system and see how dark we can make it and how much zoom. Well, no one's going to take, those aren't real photos. Those aren't, I'm going out there to try to take a photo to tell a story.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm pretty sure you started podcasting with Tiny Shutter,
Mm-hmm.
and I know I did. And that's how when I looked for a podcast about iPhone photography, that was the only one there, I believe, at the time. And it was the longest running show. It went like 9 years before it finally faded out. And then I was doing a different podcast than this, but when Mark Sadowski, when he said that was it, he basically handed the reins over to me to continue on and then change the name. And then I brought, you came with me, which I am so grateful for. And now we have Dwight on board, and we've kind of grown into what we are now. But Tiny Shutter, I learned a lot as a listener. And I got to tell you, when I first started listening, those guys were rock stars to me. and they had they broadcast it live, like just the audio feed on Mixlr, and there was a chat room there, and I thought it was so cool to be able to type in a question or a comment and have them, answer it or whatever. And
Yeah.
and it was just a lot of fun. But I learned a lot. Like Mark being the wedding photographer, I mean, he's got the experience. Joe being more of a video guy, but I mean, also into photography a little bit, but he's got that experience. And then Matt, he's just a natural. I think he's just a natural photographer. He doesn't do it professionally or nothing like that, but he's just, darn good at it, just like
Mhm.
everybody else on that show. And then, when you came on, you brought your own element of expertise. More so, I think for me, it was the consumer side. You spoke up for the consumers, and I think you still do, which is great. So, yeah, there was a lot to learn on that show.
Yeah.
Different subject matter, all kinds of things. So,
Yeah, because
that's definitely good resource.
because I literally have no training, no courses, no classes in photography. It was, hey, I had a camera, I used my Graham's 110 growing up. And
Mhm.
so I never had a 35 millimeter. I never had the exchange, the interchangeable lenses or, even, hey, go to the photography club at school and learn to develop your own film. I always went down to the photo hut for those of us who are old enough who remember that. So,
Yeah.
I've always been more on the average consumer, average person taking a photo and seeing what I could do to make it as good as possible.
Yeah. And you've come up with some bangers. That needs to be said. And I'm looking at you, Blue Cadillac. So, I think we can add on to that. And I was gonna, save this as something I maybe talked about later, but I mean, this is a good time to say it. I mean, this show is a good learning resource. And we a year ago, last September, we brought Dwight on board, and I wanted Dwight to come on board because he brought with him the desktop editing aspect of it. I mean, we were more mobile focused, I think, prior to that. And then when Dwight started to show this desktop stuff, I thought, daggum, this stuff needs to come on this show. And, and here he is. He's been here like a year and a half or maybe a little over a year and a half now. And, you know, the content is great. We still got to do one of these editing videos, Dwight.
Yeah, anytime.
We
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, you know what? Maybe, just maybe, we can do that in 2 weeks. Instead of doing a regular show, we can throw together a little bit of an editing thing.
Yeah, let's chat about that.
Um,
Maybe we can do that.
yeah, for sure. So
Well, I
anyway,
appreciate you guys having me on. It's been a lot of fun and a learning experience for me as well.
yeah, it has been fun, and I think the three of us together have a pretty good dynamic, and you know, we're the only show about iPhone photography. That's it, just us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell your friends, folks.
Yeah.
So that'll bring us to you, Dwight. You've got a resource that I've thought about a few times, and I've just never pulled the trigger to actually go ahead with it. So I'll let you explain what that is.
Yeah. So I guess I need to talk about the why a little bit first. And, I think it was probably about 9 years ago. I was finding myself taking a ride down to the beach and just taking photos of the sunset. My horizon lines were crooked and stuff, but I just loved the beautiful colors in the sky. Excuse me. And I was just like, this photography thing's kind of cool, but I have no idea what I'm doing. So I went online and I think I Googled, how do I learn iPhone photography? Then the iPhone photography school came up and it was like 80% off or 90. I was just like, okay, I pulled the trigger on it. And, Emil, who did all the videos back then, I think I was on like an iPhone 5 or 7. I can't remember. This was about 8 years ago. He just made it so nice. He's out of Latvia and it's beautiful there. And a lot of his settings were, in town. He just did the basics, exposure. And then it got pretty complicated all the way through the different lessons. And all the lessons were just beautiful. And you had homework and you had to submit it to the Facebook group and you had to, critique other people's work. And, when I first started looking at people's work, I was just like, wow, I'd say, that's a cool picture. But I didn't really know what I was talking about. It looked nice, but, from a compositional standpoint or, an editing standpoint, I didn't really know what I was talking about. So as I moved through the photography school, I was like, wow, this is really cool. So I'm learning composition, leading lines. I'm learning all aspects about photography through this thing using, through an iPhone lens. And then, back in those days with the earlier iPhone models, you take an iPhone photo, you pretty much had to edit it. There's an argument about the phones today, with the processing and that type of stuff. But, back in those days, it just didn't do as much processing as it is nowadays. So I thought, wow, I'm through this iPhone Academy. This is pretty cool. And I look and, then there's an editing academy. And this was, back in those days, it was with the earlier version of Snapseed, doing the global adjustments and a few other things. I will say that Snapseed right now is worth taking another look at. I'll just put that out there.
Yeah, I
We can
heard there
maybe
was a
talk.
new update.
Yeah, we can talk about that at another time. But so I went ahead and purchased the iPhone Editing Academy, and I really got into that. That was super fun. Again, a bunch of modules, and then they started adding different things. Since I've been there, they've got not only the editing academy that they have a video academy, they have a video editing academy, they have a Instagram academy, a capture it all, landscape mastery with Pickett, urban photography, iPhone food photography, and there's an art academy that I did go through, which was kind of like a kickstart for some of my art stuff that's not available anymore. iPhone masters and then a digital camera mastery class. And I will say that that's what launched me into this thing. And I really haven't looked back yet. It's been 7 or 8 years, and I still feel like I'm just scraping the tip of an iceberg here. I just feel like there's still so much for me to learn. So it's nice that we're all on this journey together and kind of learning together. And there's some people out there that have had some influence on me that we can discuss in a little while as we make the rounds.
Yeah, yeah, it's you know, they've got their ads on social media all the time, and it almost seems like there's always an 80% off discount, but maybe it's just happens to be when I see them, but
I've seen 90 before.
is that right, eh?
Mhm.
Wow. Maybe I should look out for that one. Um,
Yeah, he does a great job, and he has done. I think the last update he did was for iPhone 16, and every year, if there's major setting changes on the phone, they'll release another episode to kind of go through for the optimal
yeah,
settings. The format
yeah.
might be a little bit different now, where if you purchase the course, you might have to pay a little extra to have lifetime updates. But I think I was grandfathered in. But anyway, I always keep an eye on those too, and it's not only what you should do, it's why you should do it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. And just the way they do their courses and stuff, it's just so cool. Like it's easy to follow. They explain things very well, and they do have some very nice locations that
Mhm.
they go to. You
Latvia's
know,
beautiful. I mean, I'd
yeah,
love to
like
go see that Baltic state. It's beautiful.
yeah, yeah. Like
Yeah.
even Clifford Pickett has gone to places in Italy, I think,
Italy.
and
Yeah.
different places like that where the scenery is just unreal.
Yeah, Mexico too. Mexico as well. They all moved down to Mexico, I think, or might have, when things got, stability back, in that region.
Right. Oh, yeah.
But yeah, Clifford's got a beautiful landscaping class out of the Italian Alps.
Yeah, yeah. And so that, you know, unfortunately, that's hard sometimes, or not always, but sometimes that's hard to translate into where we are.
Mhm.
But for me, I'll speak for myself. It's hard to translate some of that stuff into where I am because I don't have those mountains and things like that. But the landscape for me around here is pretty diverse. Like within a 2 or 3 hour drive, I've got big city like Toronto. I've got beaches, a couple of different popular beaches around. The Niagara Escarpment, so Niagara falls over that, and that's the Niagara Escarpment. Well, that ridge runs all the way up through southwestern Ontario, right through my city where I live, and then right up the peninsula, the Bruce Peninsula. And So there's a lot of cool things to photograph that way. Waterfalls, like in the city of Hamilton, which is kind of just on the way from Niagara Falls, there's like 120 some waterfalls in that city. It's just
Yeah.
crazy.
My
I
biggest takeaway from those classes is you have to have a good, interesting foreground, midground, and background, and then framing, your subject appropriately within the frame. I mean, he gets into all that, getting
Mhm.
the right light at that time of day. That means getting up at 4 in the morning sometimes, or, catching
Yeah.
that 30 seconds you have in the evening. It's like fishing. So,
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, so, the iPhone photography school will be linking a link down below or in the show notes, and, give it a look if it's something that you're interested in. Is there any type of referral for that, Dwight, where you can
I've attempted with them, I think for a previous show, and I didn't hear back, but it's probably because they're running specials all the time. I think when I
Yeah,
looked
okay.
in there today, it was like 80% off or something like that. I think that's a
Yeah,
standard one that you were seeing as well.
yeah, okay. So, anyway, yeah, give it a look, folks. They do have a YouTube channel, so
Mhm.
you can see some segments of lessons on there. I mean, that's where I've seen a lot of it, and, you know, it's some pretty good stuff.
And I tell you what I really enjoy. I really enjoy going into the Facebook group and honestly helping people
Oh,
because you
yeah.
can see the people, posting stuff where I was, back in the day. I'd be constructive and I'd say you should probably start thinking about doing this, 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 and this, as opposed to I like your photo with no explanation. Now I can at least look at it and give it an honest opinion based on, my experience. And what that class has also done to me is, and my family will tell you because I drive them crazy, if I see somebody shooting a photo, it doesn't matter what it is with an iPhone, I will talk to that person for an hour and a half and give them as many lessons as I can.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And, just, hey, the people that you meet, right?
Hmm.
Through all this, the people that you meet, the people that you talk to and things like that.
Yeah, there's
Eh
people that watch this podcast because I've interacted with them in
Oh, yeah.
such a manner. So, yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. So speaking of YouTube, that's one of my choices as well for learning stuff because I follow a lot of photographers' channels, and they're not all iPhone photographers. Some do a little bit of both, but most of them are, they use dedicated cameras. The ones I think I follow the most would be Gavin Hardcastle, who I mentioned a couple of shows ago when we talked about our inspirations, and he goes by Photo Tripper, and Michael Shaneblum. He and Gavin have done some work together. They've done some workshops together. They were both part of the F4 road trip. If you haven't looked it up, it's hilarious, but very, very, very good. Great learning resource. And Alex Armitage, who hopefully will be on the show one of these days. He did an episode, like a YouTube video on No Fusion, and wrote a very comprehensive guide to using No Fusion. So we hope to have him on, to talk about that a little bit more. But what I've learned from these guys is with Gavin, as I mentioned before, was the light, how to work with the light, because photography is painting or not painting, but writing with light. And I've learned to, you know, if it's a bright sunny day like it was here today, I did do some shooting today. I mostly macro stuff because it's now things are starting to bloom. And even in bright sunlight, some macro can look pretty decent, but in general though, it's the warm light of the morning or the evening that catches my eye, and that's when I try to make my better images. With Michael Shane Bloom, he's all about the light too, but he's also about composition. Like all these guys are about composition, but just the things that stand out in my mind. With Michael Shane Bloom, like he'll talk about how to get a good photo with a telephoto lens. So, with the telephoto camera on the iPhone, you can use it definitely. Here we go with the focal lengths that we talked about recently. You can use that to an advantage in landscape photography. But he also talks about texture and design within the image and things like that. Like he kind of explains how to look for it and how to make the most out of it in the composition, like whether it's a waterfall or designs in the sand or something like that. Like just really cool stuff. And with Alex, it's he's okay. So recently he talked about aspect ratios, like cropping. And I think the video came out just yesterday. It's about, he used the X-Pan crop, just like on this picture behind me. That's an X-Pan crop for those on YouTube. And he talked about what the video was about was the fact that some cameras don't have that crop built in. The Hasselblad has it. Well, folks, the iPhone has it in a lot of different apps, like Mood Camera. There's just a lot of different apps that have that crop built in. There's even apps called Xpan. There's an app called Xpan that just shoots in that aspect ratio. So, you can compose your image and tell the story maybe better when things are isolated within that crop than having all this other stuff above and below that, may not really be part of the story. So, Alex brings that to the room, I guess you could say. So YouTube in general is a great resource for learning this stuff. I mean, if there's anything you want to look up or anything you want to find out about when it comes to photography in general or iPhone photography, go to YouTube, type in the search, and you're bound to find something. It's just a great resource that way. Dave, was there anything else that you had?
I would say look up people on Instagram and even local people to you that, I mean, it depends, of course, where you live and how many people live around you, but you can find people taking photos of items that you're familiar with location wise. And that can give you a lot of inspiration. You go, oh, and then for most people, they love the interaction. So you can ask questions like, oh, how did you take that? I love that photo. I've been there. How did you get that photo to look like that? And for most people, they'll interact with you and you'll get a lot of information that way. The two local ones that I have interaction that I, see a lot. I mentioned Cara Cardello with the inspiration, City Life Adventure, and then Nikki Weiser, and I was double checking her.
And we'll put links to
Yep.
all these photographers that we mentioned,
Yep.
whether it's an Instagram account or a YouTube channel. We'll have them all in the show notes.
Crazy City Lady.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And like I said, the nice thing is when they take a photo of an area, it's a lot easier for me to then say, okay, like I said, oh, here's a photo you took, where did you take the photo from? What camera did you use? Sometimes they use, dedicated cameras, sometimes iPhone. So you can get a feeling that way. Basically, if you can find someone who you can have a conversation with. And like Greg, I know you have local camera groups, and unfortunately, there's almost no camera stores anymore that you can go down, just pick someone's, brain in terms of, hey, I saw you took this. I would love to learn how did you do that type thing. And very few people are like, well, I can't tell you, that's an industry secret. No, they're willing to say.
Yeah.
I mean, I learned a lot from Ruth, my wife, because she was into photography and she, back where you had, your own black and white, you could develop it and film cameras only. And she learned, she was heavily into art. So she understood the lines and the framing and everything else. So a lot of times when we're taking photos together, like we go out, we're taking photos together, she has a better feeling of, I'll use this app, I'll use this, but she has a better feel for kind of an old school camera, oh, this is how you set this up and here's how you would set this up type thing. And just hearing someone kind of talk through it for me, that's a big help.
Yeah,
That's
for
a
sure.
big help too.
Yeah. I was going to mention camera clubs. That's a great way to learn. I always say teach what you know, learn what you don't, right? And that really holds true with a camera club because usually there will be people from all walks of life and with all levels of expertise. And I've learned from people in the club all different times, like, especially if you go out together. I can't tell you how many times we'd be out and I would be trying to do something or looking at something and somebody will just say, "Well, what if you come over here, just change your angle of view," whatever it is. There's always something to learn. So, and definitely Instagram, it's not only a good place for inspiration, but if you can actually get into a conversation with somebody, that's a wonderful way. And I don't think I've ever come across anybody who won't share
Yeah.
things. Like they may not share a location specifically, and I get that because that's partially to protect the area, like, especially if it's
Mhm.
like a natural environment. Like, I've seen people
Right.
not say, "Okay, no, I'm not gonna tell you where this is online because everybody'll
Yeah.
go there and then just ruin it," type of thing. I've
Mhm.
seen that, cases like that. But as far as technique, composition, thought process, that all that stuff, I don't think I've ever seen anybody not share that information. So that's definitely a good resource. Dwight, was there anything else that you had?
Yeah, there's a few things. When I first learned, going through the iPhone photography school, there was kind of an emotional aspect to it, kind of trying to get the feeling of what you're doing. So I would have to echo what you said earlier, Greg, as far as, watching that series with Jack Hollingsworth, that still opened up my eyes to some stuff. And part of the photography journey for me was to learn, third party cameras and manual shooting. And I have to say, David Addison's been really good, watching his videos. He does some stuff for Reflex, and he's actually part of the iPhone photography school team. So he does do
Mhm,
videos for them as well. Social media, I try to connect with with hubs that have the apps that I'm using so I can get inspiration from some of the stuff that I'm seeing, and hopefully, I can kind of, they've shown me how they've kind of done what they've done, and it just gives me inspiration to try different things. I'll tell you what's been really good lately. It's been Reddit. I think I've been spending more time in Reddit than anywhere else. On the Daz Cam one, I'm just floored by what some of these cameras do. And
mhm,
we always ask everybody for, what's their recipe? What's your white balance? And, this type of stuff. And most people are really, you know, willing to, share that with you. So it just gives you some inspiration to try that when you go out. Same with mood. I'm in that one, no fusion. The stuff that people are creating with these apps is just absolutely phenomenal. And we had a guest on the show a little while back, Michael Sage, who has reached out to me and would like to do a photo shoot. So, to echo some of the comments earlier, I think, photo clubs, or if you have an opportunity to, you know, get with somebody, go have a cup of coffee, talk about this thing and
mhm.
apply some of the principles that you've learned, and learn from each other. I think that's got to be a really exciting, way to do it. Kind of try to understand what's their mental approach to the shot. What's their, how are they looking at this from a compositional standpoint? Are they shooting, from chest high? Are they getting low, shooting up, down? How are they looking at this thing? And really just kind of learn off of each other. But YouTube, I find that there's a good amount of people that get some of the good information across. Unfortunately, some of the ones that I really like, it comes down to presets, in the end, to kind of mimic what they're trying to do, from the color grading standpoint. And I did go down that rabbit hole where I bought a bunch of presets that I never used until, I was a little more comfortable with, doing my own color grading to achieve, the cinematic look or whatever I'm trying to do. But,
Mhm.
it's getting inspiration from others and being inspired by what you see, out there. And there's a lot of different avenues to go, and it's a never-ending journey.
Yeah, and Tom says that you've been really supportive in his learning of the mood camera, and he really appreciates it. So, there's gratitude from a student.
Oh, that's great. I'm really happy, Tom. That camera has really proved to be a game changer out there. And Alex is doing a heck of a job with that. And the stuff that I'm seeing coming out of these cameras, I don't know if you're on the Reddit feed or not, but you should take a look at that. It's just these custom cameras. I have so many now, custom emulations. There's no way I can use them all. It's like, where do you even start? I'm thinking about getting rid of them all and just going back to the stock ones. But he's really supporting that app and really, really dialing it in. And some people have actually put their Fuji cameras down and they're using that instead.
Yeah, he is on Reddit, so I'm
Okay,
sure
he's
you'll
seen it
find him in
then.
there somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of the clubs, David says many photo clubs are anti-iPhone photography, and you know what? The club that I am in, there was a bit of pushback when I went all in iPhone. I was the only one to submit photos from an iPhone for quite some time, and I mean, I have heard from people who said that they didn't say anything, but they just didn't think that it was a camera until I put on I did a presentation to the club about the iPhone. Basically, I think it was more or less like an introduction to iPhone photography, I guess you could say. And at at the end of it, I said, I asked the group. I said, "Does the iPhone have a sensor?" Yes. Does the iPhone have a lens? Yes. Does the iPhone have an aperture, even though it can't be adjusted? Yes. Does the iPhone capture light and process it, blah blah blah, into an image? Yes. And then I went through the whole spiel, and then I said, "Now, who doesn't think the iPhone camera is a camera?" And nobody could put their hand up. So I, you know, I fought back, and I think I made my point with them.
Mhm.
Yeah, and
Yeah, there was
now
a there I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and now probably so every month we have like an assignment, right, where we submit 2 images and we show them on the screen. Probably half of them are from phones, Pixels, iPhones, Motorola's. It doesn't matter because people, when they're out, they have their phone with them. And they're starting to realize that, oh, well, I don't have my camera, but I can use this, and hey, I can get a picture, and there you go. So it's been a lot more widely accepted. So what were
You
you
know,
going to say, Dwight?
it's funny because I'll see people out there with their what I would assume to be pretty expensive cameras and their kits and their long lenses, set up on a tripod. There was a winter two years ago where we got some snow in our mountains and it was reflecting off the lake and it was cold, per our standards out here. But I was right next to them on a tripod with my iPhone and I had a moment lens on there, and I was getting these funny looks, but I love it. It just gives me an opportunity to talk to people and most of them say, you know what, those cameras are getting better. I tend to I tend to when I see people using a regular camera, I want to go talk to them, and
Mhm.
I start showing them, my photos. I start talking about the podcast, and my wife's got a client who travels all over the world every year and takes incredible photos, but now he's really interested in the iPhone, and I think he watches this podcast as well. So I think people are kind of opening up to it a little bit more, and I think you have to nowadays, right? I don't want to
Yeah.
carry a big kit around with me. I'll probably never use it if I bought all that stuff.
Yeah. Dave, do you have any story like just before we move on to my next one that I've got in mind here? Do you have any stories like that where you're there with your iPhone and there's somebody with a bigger camera, like a dedicated camera, and you've kind of either engaged with them in some way, or because
Not
I've
not
got a good one I'll tell in a second too.
Yeah, I really don't have something like that, but a lot of times when I'm taking photos and people notices is that I'm and you can hear Ruth in the background saying, "He's saying running again." But a lot of times when I'm taking photos, I'm out on a run or I'm out on a walk somewhere.
Yeah.
So I'm not exactly where someone would take, a dedicated kit to come along with them just because literally I'm not going to carry this massive thing along with me if I'm going on, a couple mile walk or
Mhm.
run,
Yeah.
eh, versus, "Hey, oh, here's a stopping place. That's interesting. I'll just take it out of my pocket, wipe off the lens, obviously, and I got a picture right there."
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, that makes good sense. My quick little story is I was at a few years ago, it was in the autumn, and I had I believe it was the 10S Max, and it was in the autumn. The colors were really nice. Local waterfall, a lot of people there, lots of trees with color, and there was a couple of guys out of everybody, but there was a couple of guys had their tripods set up, big cameras, big lens, ND filters, the whole 9 yards. And then I walk up beside them to get a good view of the top of the waterfall, and this was way pre-reflex, so reheld wasn't a thing then, but Spectre was from the guys at Halide. And I went up and I leaned up and I could feel them watching me. And I took a shot of the top of the waterfall, and I think it was probably I think the maximum that Spectre did at that time was 9 seconds. So I did a 9-second exposure of the waterfall. And then I opened it up in the Photos app, and I could just see them looking at me. I could tell they were looking at my phone.
Mhm.
They wanted to see what I was doing. Yeah, just like Dave. And so I looked at them and I said, "It's just amazing what these things could do now, isn't it?" And we talked for probably a good half hour. They were photographers from Toronto, and they were just totally taken aback by what I was able to do handheld with a phone and no filter, no tripod, no nothing. And the one guy said, "What the heck am I doing here with like $3,000 worth of gear?" You know, so I thought that was really funny. But they were respectful about it. They didn't say, "Oh, that's not photography." They were actually just blown away by it that it could happen, that it could be done.
Only
And
$3,000 worth of gear? That must have been, what, 20 years ago?
well, it was well, whenever the 10S Max came out, so
Yeah.
but I mean 3,000, I'm just throwing that out there because I don't know, but it was
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
it
yeah.
wasn't cheap gear, right? These were good DSLRs with good
Mhm.
lenses and filters and tripods and all that stuff. So
Mhm.
I mean, it would probably be more than 3,000, but but they were just blown away by what it could do. And I just thought that was a pretty cool thing. So my last thing that I have is editors, like on YouTube. Again, here we go with YouTube, but I mean, I can't stress enough how important that is as a resource. The ones I watch the most are Jim Nix and Anthony Turnham, because they do, like, Anthony Turnham does Lightroom, but he also does Luminar Neo. Jim Nix, a lot of his stuff is Luminar Neo. And because that's the app I use on the desktop, I've learned so much about their workflow and what the tools are and what they do. And it was so much easier to learn by watching those guys than it would be to just try stuff myself, because with Luminar Neo, I mean, there is a certain order of things, the order that you use these tools has an effect on how the image plays out in the end. So those guys are amazing. And Dwight, I know you probably weren't planning to mention this, but I think you're going to want to. But that guy on Photoshop, or the guy on YouTube that you watch, is it every Friday?
Every
He's a,
Wednesday and every Friday. Right now, he's going through all the modules of the Color FX on Wednesdays and then the TK9 Fridays. I would not
yeah,
be where I am today in photography without Dave Kelly.
Dave Kelly. I was
Yeah.
trying to think of his name. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll definitely have links to these channels in the show notes. Dave, is there anybody that you kind of watch to do with editing, or are you pretty much, run and gun type of guy?
I'm honestly, I don't watch a lot of people when it comes to editing. It's pretty much because a lot of my edits are mobile. I'm just trying and throwing stuff against the wall in terms of how I want it to feel like. And I don't necessarily have, like, I know Dwight, we've seen you when you walk through, you're like, okay, I'm working on this part of the sand, so I need to do this, and this needs to look this way. And my brain doesn't work that way. So, it's pretty much like you said, run and gun. It's more like, okay, let me see the different apps I have and let me see what I can do and what it looks like.
Yeah, because you had like the apps that you work with, you know them right? Because you've
Yeah.
been using them a fair bit. So you
Mhm.
kinda know when you think about something, you kinda know, "Okay, if I use this, this is what it's gonna do."
Mhm.
And, that's becoming a master or a not a jack of all trades, master of none, but actually the opposite. You're getting good at
Deep and narrow. Deep and narrow. Yeah.
yes, yes, which is a good thing.
Mhm.
And I that's one of the things I envy about you, Dave, is the fact that you're so dedicated to that side of it. And I can't say how many times I've said this. I wanna get into playing with that stuff, but I just can't bring myself to do it. I don't know why. One of these days, maybe, maybe on a rainy day, I don't know.
We all have our strengths and what we're comfort I don't wanna say comfortable, but what we feel when we go into. Like,
Yeah.
I've looked into Photoshop, I've looked into Photomator Pro, or Pixelmator Pro, and, things like that, and maybe if I took a class, it would be different, but anytime I try to follow along with someone, like, on a YouTube channel or somewhere else, I just can't get I can't grasp my head around the step-by-step process.
Mhm.
I can grasp, okay, this tool does this and this is how it works. But then why use this tool over this tool and why when do you use this tool and when do you use this and when do you, I just can't, like to see, I can't, my brain just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's everything in terms of learning resources. We're putting out a large variety of learning resources, but not everyone's going to learn the same way. We all have our individual styles of not only photography, but ways that we think and resources we may come across someone who teaches one way. You're like, oh, I got this. Yes, I understand. I'm on the same wavelength. And you see someone else, and not that someone's better or worse, just different. You're like, I can't, the brain's not working the same. The wiring's not the
Mhm.
same.
Yeah,
There's
that's
nothing wrong with
understandable.
that.
Nothing
Oh,
Yeah,
wrong
no,
there's
with that.
nothing
nothing
wrong
wrong
with
with
that at
that.
all. Yeah.
No, and that's
Try and
yeah,
see what's out there. Yeah.
yeah. I would say, regarding the editors, I watched a lot of Jim Nix and Jacob Bors and who are the other there's a few of 'em, Anthony Turnham, a lot of people, around the Illuminar, and I like them all. Jim Nix, he loves his colors, and he'll tell you that.
Yeah.
He'll
Yep.
he'll push them to, the hot side. But once I learned Photoshop and Dave, it was a task. I said, "Okay, I'm gonna learn this." And, it took me a while, just to get the basics down, but, once I started getting into these panels with Dave Kelly, everything kinda clicked, and to me, I just I can do everything that all these other, you know, AI editors are doing, manually, so I don't have to really do the AI piece of it. I can actually do it, on a step-by-step process. I think,
Yeah.
in contrast to Dave, I thrive on that step-by-step process and kinda looking at,
Mhm.
where can you go? And then, but I think that's definitely your quality of, "Hey, okay, I got the basics, let's do it." But I'm kind of a snob now, to be honest with you. I really feel like I'm a snob because I wanna isolate specific parts in the image while I'm working, within specific color color zones and light tones. I just don't do, global adjustments anymore, and I don't want an AI program doing that for me. So
Mhm.
I wanna be able to essentially develop my own stuff within, my own artistic license. So,
Well, if it makes you feel any better, Ansel Adams never did global edits either.
yeah,
I
right.
mean, he his magic was done in the dark room, especially
Mhm,
when it came to
Mhm.
dodging and burning and all this stuff. And I think I said on might have been the last show when we were talking about desktop editing that I used to feel a little uncomfortable about doing specific things to specific areas of the image. And then I had that epiphany that Ansel Adams did the very same thing, and nobody complained to him about it,
mhm.
at least not that we know of. You know, everybody says he was one of the best photographers to ever live, and, not just for his editing techniques, but for the ability to get out to the right location at the right time and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, you know, so, so
And then, I don't use the brightness or the contrast sliders. I don't use any of that stuff. It's all curves
yeah,
or levels.
yeah,
It's
because you
you
just
can
have so much more control that way, right?
have a lot more
Mhm.
control, yeah. And,
Yeah.
within specific tones, I'll always start with midtones, and then I'll build contrast from there. And then, like, if you're working right in the middle of midtones, like midtones 3, you're protecting your lights and your darks with your adjustments. So it's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, YouTube, I think, is one of the best
Mhm.
places for all these resources. But, there's social media places like Instagram and Reddit that also have all these people who are willing to share with you how
Mhm.
to do stuff, or, for you to share with them how to do stuff. And that's all the stuff that I have. If there's
Mhm.
anybody else that you guys have in mind, by all means, go ahead. If not, we'll.
I'm looking at Instagram less, unfortunately. I think it's kind of dying with the limited hashtags. I think people are posting less content. I think it's
Mhm.
just kind of a feeling that I have right now. But yeah, anywhere you can get additional info. But yeah, that's all I have, Greg.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Just
and I
keep
would say
learning.
kinda yeah, I would say kinda going off of that, it sounds weird, but Threads, especially because they have the subjects that you can go under, and there's a photographer of Threads section, which seems to be a whole bunch of people who would be posting on Instagram if Instagram was more photography based, and they just
Oh
kind
yeah.
of went over to Threads and the photography of Threads section
Right.
because they can post their photos. And it's not a matter of, the like we all know Instagram went from photos to video to
Reels.
whatever
Yeah.
they're switching and everything else.
Yeah.
Threads, I see a lot of photographers and I don't see negative comments as much.
Yeah. I bailed out on
Okay.
Threads. It just wasn't
Yeah.
for me. I saw it was too much non-photography stuff.
Well, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you want, pure photography, a place like Reddit, because I mean, you can get onto a subreddit that is just what you're looking for,
Mhm.
Mhm.
like these camera apps and things like that, so that's probably a really good one. But I mean, there's places like Flickr and
Yeah.
Glass and things like that too. So, I mean, the possibilities are, I don't want to say endless, but I mean, there's a lot
Very
of
varied.
possibility.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot of varied and, just because it doesn't work for one person doesn't mean it will work for you, or just because it works, you
Yeah.
find something at work, it may not work for how other people work with things.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. So, all
I
right.
have to
Well, I guess
apologize for my raccoon eyes. I guess I forgot my sunscreen when I was playing pickleball this weekend. So
Mm,
there you go. Yeah, so, I think we've covered a lot. We've given a lot of options for people to have a look at if they don't already follow these things, and, it's a great topic of discussion, and,
mhm.
Dwight, you hit the nail on the head about, was it you or Dave that said something about a roundtable discussion? No, Dave, you talked about it when, talking about Tiny Shutter. These roundtable discussions, like, we didn't have any images to look at this time, so, if you've gone through this whole thing on your podcast app, wait to see an image. Sorry. We didn't have any for this one because we didn't really need any. But, we're always looking for things to talk about. So, listeners, if there's a topic that you'd like us to cover, by all means, let us know. You can go to the website and fill out the contact form there, or hit us up on social. And the Facebook group is an excellent place. And, we're happy to sort out, if we can do a show on that topic, and we'll put something together. Tom says, "Great show, guys. Thanks." Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Tom, for
Thank you,
listening
Tom.
in and
yeah,
hanging on this long. So,
Mhm.
yeah. Thanks,
you know,
Tom.
we love it when people watch the YouTube, the live stream on YouTube, because it gives us some interaction with them, and like and subscribe, and follow us on the Facebook group. There is a Facebook page for the podcast as well. And then there's the website. You can subscribe to the website feed. If every time there's a post made, you can get a notification that we just added a post. Most particularly the show notes that will have images if we have any. But it's got all our links, and everything that you see below in the YouTube video is all on these other places as well. So thanks, guys.
Yeah,
It's
thank you.
been a good one.
Thanks so
And
much.
glad we did it. And hey, Stephen Justice here. I seen him just the other night at his camera club. I went over to one of their meetings. He just joined Glass. My recommendation, or our recommendation.
That's a great app.
Yeah, and he's really enjoying it as well as Flickr. So yeah, there's there's two places that are really good for you can interact with other photographers, and you can find photographers who not only shoot maybe your same style or matter, but with the same camera or device. So
Yeah.
that's
Let's connect
good
on
resource.
Flickr. I'd love to do that.
Yeah, for sure.
And Glass. Yeah.
Yep. So, and I guess, well, on that note, I guess we'll see everybody on the next one, which will be the night of the WWDC keynote. And we may throw in one of Dwight's edits before that. We'll see. Dwight and I'll have a little conversation about that. So, all right.
All right.
Have a good one,
Sounds good.
everybody.
Take care,
Have a
everyone.
great night. Have
Good
a
night.
great one, everyone.